Team Fortress 2 is often described as a timeless masterpiece, which isn't too much of a bold claim at first. It's a game that has lasted 16 years, 6 of those being with major developers' support and multiple attempts to try to ruin the game for everyone. However, these ends can only be justified by certain means, which TF2 manages to achieve through well-thought-out gameplay that have touched on certain aspects a few times, along a striking visual design that makes the game naturally appealing while also still serving a practical purpose within said gameplay. However, something to note about TF2 is that while it can be considered a timeless game by some, it undoubtedly is written within the time that it was created, like many other works of fiction. So instead of going the easy route of simply praising TF2, we're going to look at everything that may be considered dated about it and judging how it still stands up. Just kidding, we're probably still going to end up praising TF2. Let's just go into it. Alright, let's get an easy one out of the way first. A lot of the language used around TF2 can be considered dated. There's a lot of slang that may have been popular at the time, but just feels out of place today. The place where it was most obvious is the chants, as there's a slew of chants where all these old words or phrases reside. One of the example of these being the chant for defeating the headless horseless horseman named Sleepy Hollow, without the E in the owned. There are other chants named similarly, however it's not just that chant names that contain potentially dated slang. The Scout Elf has many of these lines that contain these words, but honestly, it's not too bad compared to the chants. In fact, it further solidifies his personality as fast dude bro, or whatever. And using slang from the period where the gamer dude bro was at full force fits him. However, it still has the potential to be lost on future generations, but only time will tell. But this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, as these are a few lines out of many. Something else I can consider dated about TF2 is the gameplay, at least from the perspective of your modern gamer. TF2 was a game made in 2007, and expectations for a typical FPS game have changed a lot in the past 16 years. You can argue it still falls in the hero shooter category, but first of all, no it really doesn't. Watch this video and give me views. And second of all, if we do put in this arbitrary category, there are still multiple major design decisions that separate the two. The modern hero shooter mainly focuses on giving the player power through abilities, while TF2 doesn't have abilities and differentiates different classes through weapons and inherent traits like health and speed. This ends up making a lot of the classes feel like a completely different gameplay difference, while in Valorant, just pick the AK. Yeah, riveting class balance. Another thing to know is that a lot of hero shooters make teamwork much more of a focus, while TF2 was specifically made not to do that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What are other first-person shooters in the market? How does TF2 stack up compared to them? Well, the divide is even more clear. A lot of games now contain more preset movement abilities like sprinting, sliding, clambering, and others you might know of. These mechanics were only popularized after 2007 when Call of Duty 4 was released, the same year Team Fortress 2 was also released. In TF2, there's one set speed for most classes that can be modified by certain unlocks, but that's about it. Every other movement mechanic is either tied to the physics or is used by a scout, with a few exceptions like the shields and jetpack. There's also the prevalence of aiming down sights to be accurate, another thing that was also popularized by Call of Duty, and therefore something else TF2 is lacking in. You're accurate for the moment your weapon is deployed, nor is there any penalty for moving in TF2. This makes the game a lot more movement focused, while in a lot of games both people are just staring awkwardly at each other through the iron sights. Also, the time to kill is relatively high in a sea of games that have interactions end at the blink of an eye. Bars. Outside of Battle Royales, of course. Another fundamental difference TF2 has for a lot of games is more focused on map control and knowledge, as their overall map design is more complex and the most reliable way to regain your health and ammo is to get health and ammo packs scattered throughout the map, which makes sense contextually in the era of arena shooters. There's also a lot more unique and interactive map elements, which, again, more common for the time. Look at stuff like Halo. However, in this modern era, maps are a lot simpler and don't really provide as powerful positions as classic map design would give players. It's not like positioning isn't completely irrelevant in modern games, as often the difference between losing and winning in Fortnite can be often high ground, but holding position becomes trivial when you add free mobility in the mix. One final main difference I found between TF2 and a lot of modern games is how TF2 emphasizes physics a lot more. Abusing the physics engine is an essential part of TF2, whether it be using explosives to launch the enemy into the air, using air blast knockback to stop an uber push, explosive jumping in general, or surfing the enemy's damage to escape a bad situation. It isn't fully a sandbox shooter like Halo, however TF2 still has a lot of these physics interactions, which is commonplace in older shooters. I could go off more minor gameplay differences, but I think I've made my point. TF2 is a very different game for a lot of modern shooters, and that's a good thing. We should have different types of games for different types of people. Variety is the spice of life, after all. We shouldn't like a game like TF2 to be more like Fortnite, or vice versa. However, there are more notable differences than just gameplay. Let's move away from how the game feels to how it looks. In the past, it could be said that TF2 stands out due to the cartoony art style. During the era TF2 came out, the most popular games were militaristic in one way or another, with games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Counter-Strike. TF2 stood out because while it had some elements of realism, it was a cartoony art style that had much more vibrant colors than your typical military sims, greens, and browns you'd see from the era. It wasn't sci-fi either, which was expected with games that took more from arena shooters, or were arena shooters for that matter, like Quake, Unreal, and Halo. Something else noted that during TF2's development, it was going to have either a military or sci-fi motif, but it ended up being scrapped to eventually sell in the iconic art style we have today. This is one of the ways TF2 was influential, because of how different it looked. It inspired other games to try to take after it and making a more stylized art direction. The most obvious example of this is Fortnite and Overwatch, but there are countless examples of this. So, does TF2 end up blending into the crowd now because of this? Surprisingly, no. Despite the countless imitators of TF2, it managed to stand out from the rest of the wacky, cartoony games of today's era. One of the reasons for this is the time period the game was set in. Not 2007, mind you, but how the game was heavily inspired by 60s imagery. There's a video by Casual TF2 that covers this a lot better than I ever could. However, TF2's art style is made with a clear artistic deliberation. There are certain details like imperfections being purposely added to make the environments feel like they could exist instead of being your typical neon colored game of perfect, blocky geometry. While there have been some complaints about certain items being added to the game that compromise a bit of the artistic integrity of the game, no, I am not defending them. I hate them as much as you do. For the most part, TF2's art style has remained intact or consistent. Again, with some exceptions. When you look at something like Fortnite or Valorant, there's a lot of stuff in the game that feels out of place, like all the crossovers and wacky skins with different themes that clash with each other. There seems to be some art style principles at first, and then you see Master Chief building a Tin Towers only for Spider-Man 2099 and Leon S. Kennedy to shoot it down. You are allowed to like or dislike this amount of cosmetic customization, but don't try to tell me it's a coherent art style, because it isn't. They're shoving in a bunch of themes and characters to sell more skins. There's also a general color scheme and setting to consider, as TF2 reserves the brighter colors for the characters, with more muted colors making use of the desert and industrial environments. Modern games usually take place in cities and more brighter environments, with an already brightly colored character. This all results in one main advantage TF2 has: visual clarity, which means basically how well you can see something. Thanks to TF2's unique character silhouettes and color contrast between characters and environment, it's nearly impossible to not see an enemy right in front of you, and the only time you'll catch yourself shooting at TF is when you suspect that they're a spy. In a lot of our games, I'm not immediately noticing an enemy due to all the visual noise. It's also why a lot of team-based games end up using outlines and just coding the enemy in a different color. They need to that to distinguish the teams, or how bad it looks. In TF2, we got uniforms, baby! It helps distinguish teams, it fits with the art style setting, and doesn't break immersion in the slightest. I could continue gushing at how TF2 is well crafted, but we came here to discuss how TF2 aged. Let's move on to something that TF2 holds from a bygone era. The social experience. The social aspect is one of those underlooked parts of any multiplayer experience, mainly because it's not really baked into the gameplay. However, for certain systems how the game feels itself, it can evoke certain emotions that can create a certain community around the game. Now, I could start describing the average social interaction in a game through vague descriptions, but I've got a better idea. Roll the clip!
Every kill you get, I'll give you an ooh.
Alright, bet.
Oh my god, I'm so nervous.
Aw, you're adorable.
Ooh. Ooh. Oh, ooh. Ooh.
Oh my god, that is so adorable.
Oh, an ace. Ooh.
Oh, what? You're live on Twitch?
TF2 is a game that allows a ton of freedom of expression, which is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you can have some great interactions with the whole team where everyone makes some great jokes and everyone has fun. On the other hand, the entire server can devolve into chaos quickly, with someone breaking the human record for N-words per second. But hey, even that can seem sometimes funny. So why does TF2 have this insane Wild West social environment and other games kind of feel, I don't know, dry? The simplest reason is censorship and reduction of outlets to interact. In a lot of Battle Royale games, you only have the potential for 3 other people to really have a meaningful interaction with you. Sure, you have a lot of enemies, but most of the time you're not here to chat, and rather to kill you. And it's assuming you can even communicate with them, as most of the time the only social interaction you can have is simply emoting, which is a limited action that probably won't be able to express that much emotion, ironically. As for team games, they're mostly laser focused on creating an esports scene to be monetized, and you're not looking to get into any controversy. So what do they do? Constantly try to censor their games so you can't express yourself as freely, as they want to have a nice outward appearance. Unfortunately for them, this doesn't get rid of toxicity. It just removes an outlet and can cause it to build up over time, leading to potentially even more toxicity. Sounds like a toxic player doesn't remove any of the toxicity, it just hides it. This mindset of censorship and removing social features clashes with older gaming environments such as the old COD games, the Bungie made Halos, and of course, Team Fortress 2. These would include more time to interact in pre- and post-game lobbies, and sometimes special features like proximity voice chat, which is a feature that needs to become a mainstay again. There's also a lot more customization to further express yourself, from TF2 allowing you to put literally any picture that isn't illegal on a sign, to COD allowing you to make your own emblems. Some features TF2 has specifically to create interaction with players, like partner taunts, freeze cams, and a donation system. Hey look, I made a video on that, to further interact player interactions. Could people use it to make some horrible stuff that you won't want to see? Yes. But can you also use it to make a bunch of funny things? Also yes. I think one of the best parts of multiplayer games is the human experience you can have with interacting with a bunch of people in the server who are guaranteed to have at least one common interest with you. The fact all this interaction is being taken away from us is a bad thing. While there will always be people who say the N-word, I'd much rather have the riot shield debate than have to deal with e-daters. Hence why I stick to TF2. There's also matchmaking to consider, as a lot of modern matchmaking systems will be more focused on trying to get the player addicted to the game rather than giving them a good experience. With engagement optimized matchmaking, or EOBMM for short, you're constantly put into sweaty matches that the game will often rig against you. This was not the case in older games, as often people of different skill levels will be scattered across the team to make a more organic experience. No need to worry about too much about winning, just pick your favorite weapon. while you're at it, why not chat with the other members on the server? Something else I got to order the matchmaking systems, along with TF2, is that the player base isn't segmented. You'll have experienced players giving new players knowledge while the casuals kick back. No need for that ranked off medals crap. But something else that TF2 carries with it is a notion that can be considered lost to time, with a lot of team-based games being released. The effort to make a team-based game where you don't need to rely on your teammates. As many of you know, the original Team Fortress and its sequel were made to try to reduce how much you needed to work for your team in a team-based, objective-based game. This was mainly in the context of Quake multiplayer being more fun with other bad players in a free-for-all, but not so much in a team game. This resulted in Team Fortress being crafted as a Quake mod. This mod captured the eye of Valve, and the rest is history. This makes the game very ruined at the time it was created, as it was a lot before a lot of games decided this wasn't a problem actually, and basically every FPS game became team-centric. You could say a star of this was Overwatch, which at the time was compared a lot to TF2. But look at certain design choices, you can see how diametrically opposed they are in terms of design, which, again, I made a whole video on. No, I will not stop shamelessly plugging my videos, as I will not pay my taxes either. This design of games being more designed around teams can be attributed to the rise of esports, which has led to a lot of games being built from the ground up to farm that esports retention. The most comical example of this being Valorant. I'd also be missing out a huge part if I didn't mention Apex Legends, which has no way to play solo in a battle royale. You know, the genre literally built around last man standing. These games want you to play as a team, however they don't really provide that much incentive outside of, if you play against another team that takes it seriously, you lose. It's the reason a lot of gaming environments seem so hostile. They're playing games that actively pit themselves against each other. In TF2, you can just ignore your teammates. They're not going to be able to sabotage you outside the rare modes when somebody steals your health pack. And then it's just going to be a slur fest after that. It's also why you're allowed to have a lot more chill conversations completely unrelated to the game. Teamwork isn't that important, and your communication can just go to trying to crack a bad joke. This goes back to the social aspect again. It's clear the gameplay can shape the community. If your game is a wannabe esport, you're going to attract a lot of self-centered people that only view their teammates as stepping stones on the path to become a pro gamer. TF2 was a game that was made before esports culture became a thing. Therefore, you get a lot less of these people. Granted, they still exist, but you can't stop nature, as I previously said. With all of this, I think I've proven that TF2 truly exists as a product of its time. People may look at it and call it outdated, but that's also the reason why it remains popular. It's the last major game remaining from its period. People are obviously nostalgic for the older days of gaming, with releases like BattleBit Remastered going viral and people playing the old Call of Duty games once the servers got fixed on Xbox. Also, please Microsoft, do the same changes on PC. I really want to see what old COD 4 multiplayer was like. Please, Phil Spencer, make it happen! These moments may be fleeting, but they show how people want to go back to the older games. There's just one problem. Not many people follow up on this desire. Playing Halo in the Master Chief Collection is fun, but you don't really see that many people playing it, at least on PC. And Halo ended up getting the best treatment, as a lot of older games are simply ghost towns, as you really can't beat the endless marketing budgets of your modern live service and the newer audience pouring out the expectations that new games have set. This is why you have a lot of people complain about how older games play. They're simply newer to gaming and had their experiences initially colored by newer games like Fortnite. However, there's one main exception to this rule, and that's TF2. It managed to stay alive and well throughout the 16 years of its existence, with the later years being colored with multiple crises. How did this happen? Developer support. One of the greatest innovations TF2 provided to the FPS scene was becoming the first major game to be actively updated multiple years down the line, so the game would receive new content and fixes long after the game was released. Sure, other games got some map packs, when those games would get 2 or 4, TF2 would keep getting them 16 years later. However, with all of these changes, none of them really changed the core gameplay deep within. You still have all the fundamental parts of the game, the gunplay, the movement, the class dynamics, the social environment, it's all still there. The one time TF2 did try to modernize was a failure, and it's possibly the reason TF2 stopped getting major updates. And with it going free to play in 2012, anyone can still try out TF2 to see how this classic game is still going today. While TF2 may be a product of its time, it can also said to be ahead of its time anyway. And that's what truly makes TF2 a timeless masterpiece. Thanks for watching, tell what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.